You get that? Take it easy. We want to start?
Yeah.
Everybody's here?
There might be a couple stragglers. I'll get it.
All right, well.
I'll keep an eye out.
It's all right.
Out for 'em.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tim. I play guitar. And I think the title of today's workshop / whatever it is Melodic Harmony. And I'm happy to talk about that, my ideas about that, but I'm also really happy to answer any questions that you might have or subjects you might be curious about, because it's a mixed bag. Everybody's got some pressing questions. I'm happy to try and address those if you have them. Why don't I talk just a little bit and demonstrate just a little bit about what I mean by melodic harmony, because I've heard people say, well, wait a minute, I thought melody was melody and harmony was harmony, and sometimes that's true, but usually it's integrated more. We have an idea, most of us have an idea. I think it comes from when we were in 7th grade and we were in our first band, and we were hanging out with our buddies, and they say, oh, you play guitar? And you say, yeah, I play guitar. They say, what do you play, lead or rhythm? Right? Everybody's probably heard that before, right, that question? So we have this idea that there's lead and there's rhythm. And lead is when you go wiggly, wiggly, and rhythm is when you go thump, 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 right? In jazz sort of world, in any kind of world, that's a false separation. Every chord progression has melody. In fact, more than you probably know, and I'm going to demonstrate that. And every melody has rhythm, because without rhythm, every melody would be, we wouldn't be able to tell that it was Mary Had a Little Lamb or Ravel's Bolero, So the idea that there's these hard defining aspects of what we do on our instruments is a false one. It's based in a kind of immature notion that when you're playing chords, you're comping and you're playing chords, and when you're soloing, you're wiggling your fingers and making funny faces and trying to play bebop or whatever. And that it's understandable why we think that, because it's kind of perpetuated, but we don't have to believe it ourselves, right? Someone calls you and says, yeah, I need a rhythm guitar player for a gig, and it pays $600 and it's only 3 blocks away. You're not going to say, listen, dude, the dichotomy between rhythm and melody is completely bogus, man. You can keep your money. No, you're going to go to the gig. So, but inside of your own mind, you don't have to make that distinction, okay? So, when I say every chord progression has melody, right? One of the things that human beings do is when we perceive a chord progression, we tend to perceive the top note, the high-pitched note, as a melodic line. So if I say, if you hear that, you're going to go ba boo ba da da ba boo do dee 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 boo 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 do boo boo dee dee, right? And that's you went the. If someone said, hey, what did he just play? You'd probably say ba boo do dee dee da 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 da, right? Some people might be. That might be the thing that sticks out, and those two things. Those are the two parts of the chord progression that we tend to hear, the lowest note and the highest note. And that's normal. That doesn't mean there's any, deficit or not. Has anybody done any transcribing? Okay, you've done some transcribing. When you try and transcribe someone who's comping, meaning they're playing chords and rhythms and stuff, the chances are that you're probably going to use the top note of whatever voicing they're playing as sort of your starting point, because it's the most obvious and easiest to hear, and then you work your way down from there with a little bit of understanding of, oh, it's a a tune with a chord progression, and I know the chord progression is 3, 6, 2, 5, and I hear this. I'll play a little better, right? Right? And then I can say, okay, if it's 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, maybe I have the bass. And then I can kind of fill in the gaps and find out what's the hard stuff in the middle, right? So that's kind of the truth about this situation. But if I play this, I change keys to C, so. There it is. We might hear do-be-dee-ba-do-dee-dee-bo-dum. We might hear boo-dee-dee-bo-do-dee-dee-do-dum. But it's not so easy to hear this. So imagine there are 4 gentlemen standing here, and they all have this, like a little straw hat, and they're going to sing barbershop quartet, right? Now there's probably a tall guy with a big Adam's apple on that end, and he sings this, right? Then there's a chubby guy on this end with a beanie, and he sings. And then there's 2 guys in the middle who look like Bob Newhart. Nobody knows who Bob Newhart is. They look like an accountant or something. And they're bald. They have a tan suit on, and they sing this stuff, right? And those are the hardest parts to sing, because everybody can hear the melody, and the bass guy knows the bass movement, but to go. Right, and say, find those notes in here. It's a little tougher to sing, and it's a little tougher to hear. But this is just as much of a melody as this. Right, and this is also a melody. We usually call it bass line. But if I wanted to make it sound more like a melody, I might say, and then it's resonating very interestingly with that motorcycle. But it's still a bass line, but it's it's got more of a melodic turn to it. So we might, if we took that same line, right, and put it up high, it would just be, oh, that's just a melody, right? So one of the things about melodic harmony is, especially on the guitar, we tend to learn these frozen grips, right? I have a book right here that's full of frozen grips, right? So, okay, I learned my E minor chord, there's it, okay, I got that one, now my A7, got that one, now the D minor 7, just like that one, only down further. So it's very visual, very graphic, and we tend to learn that way, and it's not a bad way to learn, because the guitar is a visual instrument, right? But it's easy to get stuck in that, right? And if I learn E minor and I see E minor on a chart, I'm going to go right to there. And I might not do this. I might not do this. But that's also E minor, right? So if I have this and I'm thinking, let me do a song. No, let's just do the 36251. 36251 means, by the way, in case you didn't catch the memo, E minor 7, A7, D minor 7, G7 on its way to C, okay? So if I'm looking at the real book and someone wants to play a song and that's the chord progression, I might go, if I was really hip, I'd say, because I learned that that's a good thing to do. Right? My teacher said, do that and you'll be cool, right? And that is pretty cool. But what if it's the same thing, and what if it's kind of more of a different feeling, and I want to play something like this? Right? It's a little bit more, that wasn't particularly good, but a good example, but there's a little more, like maybe there's more movement in the center of the chord, right? So maybe this business. Right, you hear that? So I can enhance the middle part of the two guys that look like Bob Newhart. I can make their lines a little more interesting, right? Or I can make the guy, on the end who's singing the bass, I can make his line more interesting. And the top one, I gotta watch out, because if I'm accompanying somebody and they're playing melody, I might want to play a counter melody to them in a much slower unfolding, or I might want to stay out of their way altogether and let them have that range and do more stuff down below. And then suddenly the bass player starts soloing, and then I might want to go out of their range and come up a little higher. So there's no like standard operating procedure really. Accompaniment, in my mind, I always say this, I like little stories. So if I say, would you like to accompany me to the coffee shop down the street? You say, okay. Well, if I ask you that, it assumes that I know where the coffee shop is down the street, and I just want you to come along, right? And accompaniment is, that's what we say when we shorten it to comping, right? Now, if I say, would you like to come with me, and then you start telling me where to go, it's not necessary, it might even be annoying, right? Or if you rush ahead, right, and start predicting my every move, like a German shepherd with a blind guy or something, that's also not really good. So accompaniment really suggests that you're going to help me. So if I need you to carry something, or if I have a lapse of memory and I think, I'm getting a little old, man, would you show me where that coffee shop is? I thought it was around here somewhere. Maybe they moved it. You go, no, I know where it is, boom, 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 right? So that means that accompaniment is empathetic, we listen, and we're spontaneous. In fact, I say, in spite of the common notion, accompaniment in a jazz situation is much more improvisational than taking a solo. Because usually, if you're honest, what you're going to do when you're taking a solo is you're leading the charge and you're doing shit you already know, mostly. But if someone's accompanying you, they got to make sure they understand what you're doing so that they can go with you and help you and support you, right? So be prepared when you're looking at your harmony, the harmony world of your role, to realize it's a deep path and a very enjoyable one, to be honest. I can comp for somebody all day long and just love it, because for me, I've digested the job to an extent that it becomes, I can accept and embrace the improvisational aspect of it, right? So let's say I'm going to sing a song that goes, okay. Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? To miss her each night and day. No, I'm not wrong, but feelings get stronger the longer I stay away. And that was a pretty filigreed version, right? Now, that's not in any real book. What's in the real book is 4 beats of this and then 4 beats of that, or whatever. So we have to be able to take what's on a chart, especially not on a big band, because then you're supposed to be doing what you're told. But if a singer says, "Hey, do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" And I say, "Yeah, I know. What key do you like to do it in?" They say, "Oh, I do it in C." And I say, "Oh yeah, good. I know it in that key." Okay, ready, go. Give me an intro. Right? And then my job is to set this person up. In this case, the person happens to be me, so I'm having a really nice conversation. The guy I'm playing with is really hip. So, but I might say, almost it. To miss New Orleans, to miss her each night and day. You know, I might do that, but I also could, if the singer is with me and it's a hip thing, I might say it might be something like this. Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans, to miss her each night and day? Right? There's room for all of that stuff. Or, do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? And if I'm doing this, it's just as important for me to hear, you know, that inner stuff, because that's where I'm making that tenor line pop out.
Do you practice that, Tim? Like you get, like when you're learning a tune, you know, you find those single lines and just learn to sing them?
Of course. Yeah. It's second nature for me now. But I think it's a very good thing to do.
Yeah.
What I believe is that as soon as you have heard from somebody, or you've experienced for yourself by transcribing something, that those things are valuable and important. The inner notes, the notes that are inside of the chord of your common grips, right? As soon as you hear the news, those things have value, musical value, and are interesting, and you can pay attention to them and manipulate them and control them, you'll start doing that. You'll start being aware. Maybe at first you won't know how to do it, but as soon as you think about, oh God, that dude came and he played those things in the middle, and I love that shit. That's what I want to try and do. Then you can study, you can look, you can do all sorts of things. But I say once you take the lid off, it's very difficult to begin ignoring it again. Right? And so one good way to practice is take your common stuff, C6, G7, C6, F7, E minor, E flat 7, D7. That much. Then follow what happens on every string separately. So it might be kind of weird and hard at first. You might have to hold the chord down and just play that string, right? So that's a C6, and I'm playing the 6. Then I go to a G7, and that melody actually goes up. If I had started on a C, which I did a minute ago, then it would go down. But I started on 6. Then it stays the same. Then it goes down. I'm playing the low note and that note, so you can hear it. Then it stays the same. Then it goes down. Then I make a big jump. I'm going to go to the G string now because it's an F chord and I don't have it. The note that's on the D string is quite a bit further away. Hear that? What's happening on the G string? Right? And if you play solo guitar, which I do, it's one of my favorite things to do. Inside stuff is so much fun because when the melody is singing out, then I have something in the middle to run around with. It takes a while to even get the physicality to do it. You notice my fingers were doing, they weren't just playing grips, I was moving them around, doing counterpoint and those kinds of things. So it takes a while to get the physicality. It's really good to learn some arrangements that have that stuff in it, like even some classical music or good guitar arrangements. But again, once you're aware of the fact that it's possible, then you're kind of cooked, right? And you know, I remember hearing Ted Green in 1975, and I got cooked. I mean, he just cooked my brain right there, and I've been you know, kind of steaming in that pot for another 50 years past that, right? So it's a wonderful thing. It really is a wonderful thing, and it falls into this general kind of basket of what I call melodic harmony. Okay, and there's a million ways to do it. Some of my favorite guitar practitioners of this art are Ed Bickert. Anybody know who Ed Bickert is? Yeah, we got one. Okay, by the end of tonight, you go on the Google machine and you find out who the hell Ed Bickert is, and then you're going to hear the most beautiful comping guitar player ever, right? And he was so rich harmonically that he didn't feel like he had to go, okay, I'm done comping, you know, and play all of his hippest, fastest shit, right? So there's this great thing. He made a couple of records with Paul Desmond, because a little side thing here. Paul Desmond made an agreement with Dave Brubeck that he would, if he made any other records outside of the Brubeck quartet, he wouldn't use a piano player. So,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So the first few records he made with Jim Hall, and they're available, and they're usually available as French imports. And then maybe now they're on CD. They're certainly on YouTube. And then Jim couldn't make it. Paul was going to go to Canada, and he wanted Jim to come with him and play these gigs. And Paul said, "Well, if you're going to Canada, why bring me? You should talk to Ed Bickert. He's a Toronto guy. And he's got a good trio. You could hire the whole trio." And that's what Paul Desmond did. They made a live record. They made one studio record, or maybe two, and then did some appearances. Then Paul got sick and couldn't do it anymore. But so they're playing. I don't know what song. I can't remember what song, but let's say it was Darn That Dream, right? And they're playing, and Ed is doing this beautiful comping. So if we're doing it bossa, Paul's soloing beautifully as he does. He doesn't play it flashy or anything. And then it comes time for Ed's solo. And what does Ed do? The whole first chorus, he just keeps going like this. He's not in any big hurry at all. He just keeps playing because the comping is so beautiful and so logical, and he just didn't feel the need to go wild on single lines and drop out the chords. It's a quartet with a guitar player, so that then the guitar player, if he stops or she stops playing harmonic material and goes into some wild licks, the bottom kind of drops out, right? So then Ed would also do this. So he's playing melodies, but he's also accompanying himself, like we wish everybody would, which is leaving space and then filling in behind when there's a little gap, And that's another beautiful thing to do on the guitar. It's hard as hell, but it's very cool to do. And you can't really do it unless you understand how to leave a place in the phrase. So if you say, there's no stopping, so then there's no place to put that. But if you say, then it's a whole thing. Then you're playing the whole guitar. You're not a rhythm guitar player or a lead guitar player. You're playing music on the guitar, right? Like a piano player would obviously do, but nobody says, I'll let you figure it out. Nobody asks a piano player to play, hey, could you play some chord melody for me? They don't ask him that because that's called playing the piano, right? So we even have to make a special name for it. You know, it's like when you're playing chords and melody at the same time, we're like, that's a special thing, right? Got to learn how to do that. But it's just music playing, right? So one cool thing you can do along those lines, let's take a blues because it's easier to follow, is you can play a line and then punctuate with a little bit of a chord. In the blues, there's a really neat thing that happens because in B flat, there's a little 2-note bit that represents a B flat 7th chord. It's the 7th and the 3rd. Some people say, oh, those are guide tones. In this case, they are. And then if you move it down a half step, that's the 4 chord. And if you move it up a half step, that's the 5 chord. It's very easy to make them suspended by taking the 3rd and moving it up a half step and then letting it come back down again. But let's say we got things to that. If you're by yourself, you might say, but there's still this, right? And so for me, that's how we can get to doing what I just did there, where I'm kind of living in this sort of 3-layered chess. You ever seen Star Trek where they play chess on 3 different layers? It's, you know, you can imagine how much more complicated it is. Even if you know how to play chess really good, you got to look this way, but then you got to look that way and that way, you know. It's kind of like that, where I have to keep, I'm going to say it right. I want to play in a way that all of the voices are cared for. So the melody comes naturally. Ba-do, ba-do, dee, ba-do, da-do, da, boo, da, da, boo-do, ba-do, be-do, be-do, do-day. Right? And then underneath that, I want to be able to play. Maybe not that complicated, but something like that. But then the cool shit in the middle is ba 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 do dee, boo do dee do dee do dee do, and I can strip out whatever part of it I want to concentrate on, so I can say ba-do-ba-do-dee. That didn't turn out very well. Hear the 1 go to the 4 there, then the 5, and then back to the 1, then there's the 4. There's sharp 4 diminished, which is very much like 4, except the bass note's different. There's 6 dominant, 2 dominant, 5, and then if I have the facility, I could take basically what I just did there, maybe simplify it, slim it down a little bit, and add melody up on top. etc. And then all the various ways of harmonizing the blues come into play, and you can do the, kind of turnarounds of fancier things or whatever you want, counterpoint and all that stuff. But what it means is that all of the whole guitar is being seen as a whole thing. And of course, I'm not always going to play like that, but the knowledge of that allows me to strip it down to just maybe one or two notes and still participate while maybe somebody else is playing the melody or someone else is playing the bass. Usually that's the case in a quartet, right? So then I can concentrate on those middle voices and see if I can get an orchestration to occur rather than just chunking out grips. But we start with chunking out grips, right? Well, let's say we start with this. Key of C, C major 7. Everybody knows that chord, right? Then we take that up the key, D minor. Same voicing, 1, 5, 7, 3. Some people call these drop 2. I don't know if you guys use that language here, but I call them V2. G7, A minor 7, B minor 7, and C. Okay? So that's what you might see somewhere in a book, or someone might suggest to play a harmonized scale. When you play a harmonized scale, one way to do it is to play the same voicing for all the chords. Not very good voice leading, but it's a way to learn the family of chords, right? Then I always suggest taking the melody note and expanding on it. And then you can do all sorts of things. That was a little melody. I call that 3, 4, 5, 3. The reason I call it 3, 4, 5, 3 is that it's the third of the chord, then the fourth of the chord, then the fifth of the chord, and then back to the third. And you do that on every station along the way. It's basically called a sequence. What will happen is you'll start to notice that the diatonic patterns of the 3, the 4, and the 5 are ever changing. And now with the 4, what we notice right away is when we get to the 4 chord, the 4th degree of that chord is sharp, right? Someone would say, well, isn't that the Lydian mode, Tim? Well, it might be similar to that, but it isn't that in this type of context. This is a diatonic situation where we're just playing the right notes in the key underneath the chords in the key, right? Then we can do various other things that incorporate the 2, for instance. Now, if I play 3, 2, 3, when I get to the 3rd chord, I have to play a flat 2, which doesn't fit under this bar like the other one, the 2 chord did. So then I got to find out where's flat 2, right? And then another flat 2, right? Well, that one I didn't play flat 2, I played the hipper sound, the melodic minor version of that. Okay, so then you can do all sorts of things with that, and you get it to sing, and you get the chord to ring underneath. So if I'm playing Satin Doll, I don't know why I picked that one, it's the dumbest song ever, so you know this song. So someone's singing that, and I might say, work with the melody so you're not stepping on it, or maybe there's, then your solo comes up and you can do something a little bit more movement, a little bit more melody. But you want to be able to touch the chords and let them ring and let the melodies move around and above and through. So it takes a certain technique. A lot of times guitar players, when they're first learning something, let's say you say, I like that song, I'm going to learn that Tim's arrangement of that. And it might sound a little bit like this at first. Right, and it's lumpy and all the notes are short, and you can hold them down, and then you got to take them off to play the little melodic connections and all that stuff. That's our lives, right? Well, we need to be able to play. Take it real slow, maybe, and elegant, And I'm doing a little orchestration with my right hand on there. I'm playing the melody, and then you hear the voices inside, the two accountants, they went right before the bass note. So it was like this. And by separating out those events, I made room for them to occur and be audible, rather than saying. Which is mostly what we start doing, right? So the right hand, if you're playing fingerstyle or picking fingers or whatever, can be the arranger and the orchestrator. The notes aren't any different, but where we put them in the vertical event. I call it displacement of the vertical event, right? The internal dynamic of the vertical event is the long version. And then so there's loud notes and soft notes. The melody tends to be a little louder. The bass note tends to be a little louder. Those inside notes tend to be a little quieter. And so all those things come into play when we're thinking about the realm of melodic harmony. And whether we're playing in a big band, or in a rock band, or on a jazz combo, or solo guitar, or whatever it is. Heightened awareness of the voices as they're moving is a good idea. All right? I think it's time for questions. Yes?
One thing that I learned from a Julian Lodge masterclass that I watched on YouTube was how he chooses to learn a tune. And it's almost like the reverse of what you were describing with inner voices. And he kind of approaches it like, learn the melody and try to accompany with just a bass line.
Yeah.
And I was curious what your thoughts were on that approach.
Julian stole that from me. No, we agree on that.
Okay.
We agree on that. So I think when you're first learning it too, awareness of the inner voices is really important, but I don't think we start there. We do exactly what you say. You learn the melody. That's one of the things that we fail at. I hear so many guys playing solo guitar, and they're giving short shrift to the melody because it's inconvenient to the chord shapes that they know. That's why chord melody is a little bit of a trap, because they think, oh, I got to play the chord. And I say, no. It should be called melody something, not chord something, right? Because you can play. Have chord grips on. And usually that's a song called All the Things You Are. And usually if you went on YouTube right now and you said, easy chord melody version of All the Things You Are, what someone would show you is this. Right? And that's a good place to start. Then the orchestrator has to come in, and then you got it. But if you really wanted to do it well and teach it to yourself, is if you play the melody. That is a beautiful thing, right? And it's often kind of blown off. But it's beautiful. Now, there are people who say, well, come on, man, we've heard that melody. 80 years old. We don't need to play that melody. That's okay. When you're learning, you probably want to. my theory about this, I'll just take a little side trip. This is interesting for the jazz educators of the group. Sometimes there's this notion that when someone's trying to learn how to play jazz, the first thing you should teach them how to do is play modal music, so they can play a simple scale over a simple chord, right? And in some ways that does a disservice to the process, because in 1959, Miles Davis and his cohort made a beautiful album which is often associated and kind of labeled as the modal, the entry into the jazz world of modal sounds, right? But we cannot forget that Miles, Cannonball Adderley, Bill Evans, Wynton Kelly, even Jimmy Cobb, they've been playing songs probably for 30 years before they made that record. So when you've got this, well, is that it? Right? And you're playing the so-called Dorian thing, right? And Miles says, that's a melody. I mean, that's not a mode. You know, I mean, it is, but he didn't just say, okay, I'm going to go up and down the mode. He played a melody based on the environment he was in, which happened to be a Dorian environment, right? Can't do that if you haven't done that. You know what I mean? If you haven't played hundreds and hundreds of songs, you're not going to know what a good melody is. But if you played, if you played standards, that's why we learn them. We don't learn them so we can become, Bobby Short in a New York City cabaret somewhere. We learn it because that's where those songs teach us. Those songs teach us everything we need to know, pretty much, right? You learn a Cole Porter song and you learn about how a minor 2/5 that resolves to major sounds. And if you learn a Jerome Kern song, you find out how to cycle through the changes, and then hit a pivot point and cycle through the changes in a different key. There's all these things that happen inside of these songs, and they teach us how to construct and play a beautiful melody, right? So melody's profoundly important. So we start with that. We learn how to play it beautifully, and the hardest thing to do, most of us have trouble with this, is when we're not playing anything. What do we do, right? You are the promised kiss of springtime, right? A lot of people say, you are the promised kiss of springtime, and and it's like they don't pay attention to the spaces. If you've ever tried to accompany an amateur singer on like a, karaoke night or something, if you're unfortunate enough to be the band, you get all sorts of stuff where they just jump over or leave out the rests. Right? So you got to learn the song, including the rests, even if there's not really much going on, like, the things you are. And then, simplest thing, at the bass line, the roots of the chords of the moment. Try to play the melody as beautifully as you did before when you weren't playing it. Then, next thing, add the fifths to the bass. Okay? And then, once you get that, you've established the outside parameters of the song, of the physical aspects. You're going to play your F here, and you're going to play your melody there. There's only a couple of choices about how to do that. You can do it down here, you can do it here, you can do it here, maybe you can do it here, but you want to find one that works. You don't have to get all confused about the 14 different possibilities for playing each one of those notes, because there's only a couple of places to play it, but it sounds good, right? And then you do that with the extra bass notes, make a little duet. I always say make a duet out of it, right? And then fill in the space between with appropriate chord tones and color. Right? So right here I have the outside frame of the root and the flat third, right? Well, because the flat third is already represented, maybe I don't need to double it down below. So maybe I'll do a 9. Or maybe I'll play a 5th. Or I'll play a movement there. Right? There's all kinds of things that can happen, right? But because I've got the melody and the bass, I can support whatever I can physically get to. I don't have to worry about notes that are over here because I'm up here. Right? So I think that's a real good strategy because it promotes a couple of things. It promotes loving the melody. That's the first thing you do, is if you can play the melody beautifully without any accompaniment, chances are that you're going to respect and really care for the melody when you add things to it. Okay. Then you can do all sorts of interesting things. You can play busier parts while the melody's singing. I love it when the melody sings. Right? That wasn't very good. You know, you can do that and play around and goof up like I just did. Or you can play, you know, a 4/4 feel. Usually we think, you know, it's going to be rubato. Oh, sorry. I'm playing the 4/4 on the middle two notes. Arthritis is a bitch, guys. If I walked into a room and someone was doing this, I would dig it, man. It would be nice, you know. My mom would probably dig it too, you know. Etc. So you can do all sorts of things. You can do completely rubato and play dits and dots and, you know, scatter the chords around, all kinds of things. But I think learning the melody and the basic root motion is the primary thing. Then once you do that, you can do all sorts of other things. Other question? Yes.
Do you find it helpful to actually, like, to practice this, like, to actually write it out and, like, write out, like, a chord melody? Or is it better to try to... I find sometimes when I write things out, I tend to rely on what I wrote rather than like really internalize what it is. So like, how do you navigate that?
Well, writing things down can be an interesting exercise because actually then when you write it down, you can see if if a voice drops out. You can see on the paper if there's good movement and logical movement. You can see if the voice leading is minimal and you know, proper. That's why I think it's helpful to write things out. Not necessarily to imprint them on your brain and play them the same every time. How long have you been playing? I hate that question, but I have a
14 years.
14 years,
Yeah.
okay. You got another 50 to go.
Yeah.
And it's a little sad, like in year 49, to be playing the same thing that you made up in year 2. Right? So allow it to grow. Allow these things to expand. Okay, I'll give you a little anecdote about that. I went to have my first lesson with Ted Green. Does everybody know who Ted Green is? Maybe you do, okay. If you don't, you should know. He's an incredible genius guitar player, and I was fortunate enough to study with him. I went there prepared to play something for him, and it was the song Body and Soul. And what I played was a little bit like this. What's that song? Yeah. I didn't play that part right that day. And this is, you know, an 18-year-old kid made that up. That was pretty good, right? And Ted said, oh, man, Tim, that's very nice, man. In his style, he would say, oh, that's very nice. You did a great job with that, but let me show you something, right? And he said, maybe you get that middle voice to move a little bit. Right? And I was like, what? right? I mean, it was like this. It's just secret agent, man. Really. Right? But he did it in such a way that the melody sustained the bass. Then, oh, sorry. Right? Well, the melody went doo doo doo. He went doo doo. And then, so that's all he showed me. Right? To get to the B flat 7, which is the 5 of the 2 chord there. So then I said, oh gosh, he can't just mean that. This is, the next 50 years after that revelatory moment. I'm thinking, I want it to go, all this little stuff in the middle, I couldn't get enough of the moving lines in the middle while the melody sustained and the bass did its job, right? So that's the long goal. So if you write it down, look at it carefully, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's good work, and then put it in a folder to archive so you can look back on yourself, and say, oh, that's the first thing I wrote down on Alone Together. That's pretty cool, But don't get frozen in it, because that's the death of this music, We're not classical musicians. We don't write, in my opinion, we don't write these incredible, brilliant things that are meant to be played and repeated over and over and over throughout generations of time. And I don't think that Mr. Bach thought that either. He was improvising, really, and then he just improvised with black dots, And he had, a group or chorus of people to sing and play what he wrote. But always moving forward. That doesn't mean you can't build on what you did, right? And if you wrote it down, if you're smart enough to write it down, you probably can play it too at the stage that you made it. But then rely on curiosity and rely on the sort of nagging feeling that it can somehow be more interesting or somehow be a little bit unique or something. What would happen, even if I didn't learn that, okay, that's fine. What does it do? It starts on the 1 and it goes 1 2 1. Okay, I'm going to change to the key of A minor. Okay, if I put it in the key of A minor, I'm in a whole nother kind of part of the guitar. And I can say, oh shoot, what I learned about it in the key of D flat, I am now in, no, it's not the key of A minor, it's the key of G, but it starts on an A minor chord. I have to deal with different topology, and it might open the tune up, to a new way of singing, And so I always stay like, Body Soul was one of the first songs I learned, the first difficult song I learned as a young budding jazz guitar player. And I've been banging my head against that song for 55 years. And I love it. I play it probably at least, I don't know, every other gig, for somebody calls it or whatever. And I played it with brilliant people. And last weekend I played it with John Stoll, and we played it in 3. And, someone else, the singer might say, oh, I love Body and Soul. Do you know it? Can you play it in the key of B? Okay, I'll give it a go, And all of that stuff, the life of the tune is rich. So I would hate to think that you make something up even after 14 years and then that's it, that's what you get for the rest of the time. Okay? So keep pushing, keep looking, keep turning it over, fuck with yourself, right? And say, well, if I know I'm getting really good at this, I'm getting really good at it, I'm getting a little bored with it. That's usually how it goes. It's like, human beings are really funny. We kind of dig something, we're perplexed by it, we're fascinated by it, we get good at it, and we all of a sudden think it's not as hip because we're good at it. it's kind of a weird self-hatred, you know. If I can do it, it's probably not that hip, right? So change it up. Throw curves at yourself. Okay. All right. Good. Yes.
So a lot of the rep that we've talked about today was sort of medium tempo to like ballad tempos. Like one of my favorite tunes is Ciora by Lee Morgan, and it's one of those tunes that I've never fully understood how you can make a guitar arrangement out of it, because the melody is so 16th notey, the harmony is, there's a lot of harmony. How would you approach playing up tempo and more melodically challenging up tempo tunes?
Yeah, you gotta kind of, you can work some stuff out, and also you could break things up, right? And that's what I would say on even if you have an arrangement, like I hear this sometimes, someone will arrange Confirmation or something for solo guitar, and then when it's over in literally 70 seconds because of the tempo and everything. And then what do? They blow like they're playing with a trio.
Right.
Right? And I'm not a fan of that, although it's good to know how to do. Right? If you can carry that, you know, it means you have to be able to play with a good time feel and just melody. So my strategy is, one way to practice that is, now, Ciora, I don't know it well enough to just do it right now, but you can work things out and then adopt a certain kind of broken style. This broken style might sound, I'll use that song, Days of Wine Okay, I want to be able to do that. So I'm relaxed, and it's the melodies are reflecting the changes, right? So you can hear. Right, so you have to be able to conceive of that melodic part. But then you can say that the usual strategy is don't stop, because if you stop, there'll be a break in the flow of eighth notes, and it'll feel like the groove falls apart. Well, that's a trap, right? It's not bad if you can play really groovy eighth note lines and really cook. I mean, Pat Martino could do it. Tons of tenor saxophone players can do it, you know. But typically, we might want to say, I lowered the tempo a little bit. You got to be thematic. You don't have to play as many notes as you think you do. And if you're using various strategies, you can use shout chorus kind of effects. Let's say its rhythm changes the way up. Right, that kind of thing. One, two, three. See how I'm splitting it up? Right? by faster, so you got to keep your mind clear, right? Because if your mind is scattered, it's going to sound scattered. So a lot of this stuff is, the big mystery here is, how do I keep my mind when I play hard shit, right? And it's got to be like this. And the great players can play any tempo and be relaxed because their mind is like this, right? So watch your mind when you start thinking, oh, it's fast, and then the panic words start happening, right? If you've got any talking in your mind at all, it's usually not so good, especially at fast tempos. There's no time for you to be having a conversation with yourself about how much you're sucking, or, or whatever. I mean, that's usually the quality of it. Oh, fuck. Oh, God. I don't have enough ideas for the bridge. I played that already. Oh. You're trying to play music in the midst of all that. If someone was standing next to you saying all that stuff, you'd want to punch them, but you're saying it to yourself, So, I said this thing has kind of become a little famous because of the internet, but I was visiting some guys over in England that have a very popular YouTube show called That Pedal Show. And I was the one guest that they've ever had that never uses pedals. But anyway, they were talking about learning and doing this and that. And they said, well, could you sum it up? Like, how do we handle all this, stuff? I said, well, the first thing is learn a little tiny bit. That's the first part. There's 3 parts of it, actually. The learning something new part, you learn it a small bit, right? And I say, take small bites and chew it well. Then the next part is the most important part. It's usually what I call the practicing part. Is you take something that you've learned, and you learned it slowly and correctly with a lot of analytical mind, because you really want to make sure you're doing it right. Paying attention, judging. If you play a wrong note, you don't want to, iron that wrong note into your practicing. You want to eliminate it, correct it, go forward. So you have one small idea, maybe 4 bars of the melody of a song or something. Then the next part, the practicing part, you practice it repetitively. So you can get over the physical hump, you can ingrain it in your mind, you learn how to sing it, you learn how to play it, you learn how to do it in many different keys. You can, doing that part of it, you can kind of relax a little bit. Maybe I like watching golf, on a Saturday afternoon and doing the repetitions, right? Because you don't need to pay absolute attention. In fact, you'll kill yourself and drive yourself crazy or get angry if you're paying too much attention to the repetitive part, okay? Then the next part is what I call the performance part, which is when you actually play music with the thing. Now, you might not be able to do that right away. If you're learning a melody and you learn 4 bars at a time, there's 32 bars of the thing. Maybe it takes a little while to learn the whole thing before you can get to the point where you can play it, and then as you get better, you can learn more quickly and you can learn larger chunks whatnot. And then the next thing I said was, the biggest mistake that we make with the first one, which is the learning part, is wanting too much. We're like these little gluttonous pigs, we want to grab new shit until it almost makes us vomit, There's no way, if you learn 15 new things on a Saturday afternoon, that you're ever going to be able to use any of them, because you aren't going to have enough time in your life to do the repetitions that cause it to be second nature to you, right? You have to be patient, and the big mistake is wanting too much. Now, the next phase is the repetition part. The biggest mistake there is wanting too soon. So you get it right 2 or 3 times, and then, okay, I'm ready for the big stage, Okay, I'm gonna go to Jazz Alley and play that big, I learned it, I played it perfectly twice, guaranteed, right? That's a big problem. So wanting too soon means you don't allow yourself to deeply learn and then digest the physicality and the sound and all of that. And even the emotional thing, because if it's a hard thing and the first thing you think of is, oh, here comes that hard thing, you got to strike that. You got to get rid of that little preemptive stuff, right? Just shout, yes, yes. That's all that should be happening in your mind when you're playing, right? And then that brings me to the third thing, the performance thing. The biggest mistake is wanting anything, right? So in some ways, the best performance mind is a mind that is not thinking about what you're doing. Or if you're thinking about it, it's in very, very kind of wide global, swaths. The last thing you want is the bookkeeper who runs the show in the learning phase to be at the gig. You want to shut that fucker up, you know. The bookkeeper has no place in the performance realm. Unless someone says, you know, there's 100 people in the audience and they say, read that chart. Read it perfectly because there's 100 people out there and you're supposed to be able to read that chart perfectly. Well, then let's hope the bookkeeper shows up a little bit because you got to be able to do some skills, right? But when it comes to improvising, you really have to let yourself go. Let the thinking slow down or stop altogether and just be in the world of sound. Respond to the sounds. You practice them. You practice them a lot. So now you can actually respond to them in a thing that isn't about words. It isn't about spoken language in our minds telling us, oh, time to go to the G7 chord. Oh shoot, what are you going to play, a flat 5 there? How about melodic minor up a half step? It's going to sound like that conversation. We don't want that. You know, when we came in, we were listening to Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny is a beautiful improviser, you know, and he's a lot of things, but he's really a beautiful improviser. And when he's playing, you know he's not talking to himself. He's got, the bookkeeper is back at the hotel, you know. So anyway, that's my thing about that. Playing individual lines, melodic lines at any tempo that reflect the changes and keep a groove is something everybody should work on. And I don't think you should do it always with a metronome. Because if you do it with a metronome, it's the same as doing it with a drummer. And you want to be able to do it by yourself. So you have to internalize the feeling. Don't worry if you rush or slow down, unless it's a real bad problem, like you start and then 8 bars later you're twice as fast. Then you have to work on something, right? You have to find out what's going on. But with a pick or with fingers, let's say I'm just going to work on rhythm changes on that. And I want to go. Should be cohesive enough. I think everybody probably could still hear, you know, the beat and the flow, and maybe if you're more sophisticated, you hear the changes. It should be as cohesive as this. We expect ourselves to be able to do that, right? If we want to get proficient. But we should probably be able to do about the same thing with just individual melodies. Then the next step after that might be to play Cottontail, and it's just you and her, and she says, you know, that song doesn't work slow. So you got to figure it's going to be fast, right? So you got then what? After 60 seconds, she's going to say, "Take it, man," and then you got to be able to do something, man. And maybe you just keep comping, and that's fine too. I mean, sometimes I play with bass players who aren't really facile, right? And they say, "Oh, I can't solo." If I look at them and say, "Take it," you know, because it's a trio, you got to do something, right? And they say, "Oh, I can't do it, it's too fast." I say, just keep playing lines. Everybody loves that shit, right? If it's grooving and you just, that's great. That's some of the earliest bass solos were just the bass line maybe going up a little higher, but still just playing quarter notes in a groovy way. So you can do that type of thing, you know, with chords and you know, on a fast tune. It's cool. You know, there's all sorts of strategies. And in the course of an evening of solo guitar, for instance, if that's what we're talking about, or a duo with a singer or something, you got to do a lot of different strategies. You have to have a lot of stuff in your bag, you know, a good Latin beat, you know, a couple of different tempos, you know, nice rubato, ballady kind of stuff, medium tempo that swings like real juicy, bluesy stuff, and fast stuff, right? That has, you know, that it holds together, however you manage it. Okay, how are we doing on time?
Good, about another 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Another question?
I got a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you listen to music and how it impacts your practice.
Oh, great question, great question. When I listen to music, it's all I do. Okay, I don't listen to music in the car. I don't listen to music while I'm, you know, putzing around the house, because I don't want to have even the notion that music is going to be wallpaper for another activity, right? And it turns out that I can't hardly not do that. That's a funny sentence. Because what happens is, if the music catches me, I got to stop doing what I'm doing so I can listen to it anyway. So it's not very handy, right? So I don't listen to music. When I was younger, I listened to music all the time and I soaked it in. And I think that's really, really valuable, to live in the, in the environment you want to embrace. So I love Charlie Parker. So I would basically listen to Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and bebop, and Bill Evans was another, you know, guy that not in the bebop world that I loved really a lot, and I just listened to them as much as I could. But oftentimes it was just sitting there and listening, or laying on the bed and listening. I play music at night when I sleep. So I have a feeling it goes in somehow, right? And that's the emotional part of it. I want to make sure that when I'm listening to music, I want to pay attention to it as closely as I want people to pay attention to me when I'm playing. You know? So, then I also believe that that's the first step. If you're a guitar teacher and a 13-year-old child comes in with a pointy guitar and you say, well, what kind of music do you like? I like heavy metal. Oh, what kind of heavy metal music do you like? Oh, I don't know. Well, who's your favorite heavy metal guitar player? Oh, I don't know. Well, how often do you listen to heavy metal? Oh, I don't really. You know, I just heard from somebody it was good, or whatever. You know what I mean? We would think, well, what are you talking about, Randy? You gotta listen to the music that you want, you know? Well, same thing with jazz. And people say, well, how do I get into jazz? And I say, how much jazz do you listen to? Well, because some people think jazz means theory. Right? If you want to learn music theory, then you always get stuck with jazz, because, you know, you're not going to learn about 2-5-1s and harmony necessarily by studying Black Sabbath. As cool as they are, it just doesn't. They don't have that stuff, right? So, first step in anybody's journey is listening, and listening in a devoted way, and listening to the people that you like, and obsessing over them, and reading books about them, and just getting into the emotional relationship with the music. Because that music started when, you know, these people would be playing in nightclubs 5 nights a week, or 6 nights a week, or 7 nights a week, and people would go there and they would listen, you know, and maybe they would dance, and maybe they would try and get laid, maybe they would do all the stuff we always do, but that music was always in, you know, there. And they were playing improvised solos on pop songs of the day, which everybody was listening to nonstop anyway, you know. And so it takes a lot of listening, really, really believing that the first step in the process. If you want to get good at bebop, then you got to listen to a lot of bebop. If you want to get good at playing out, you got to listen to a lot of people who successfully play out, you know. Or if you want to learn how to play beautiful melodies that make everybody cry, then you got to listen to people who do that, right? So that's number one. Now the next thing, as listening as an exercise in concentration and an exercise in learning how to ignore some shit while you're listening to other shit, is try this. Get a, let's say a Red Garland piano trio record. Red Garland never plays, you know, very busy or anything, and he's got these great records. They're worth listening to, especially for guitar players, because Red Garland Trio is pretty much the model for the guitar trio, even though he's a piano player. Because he's kind of a minimalist piano player. He doesn't play these big flourishes. He's not Art Tatum all over the place. And a lot of the early guitar trios, like Barney Kessel's trio, which is one of the very earliest, those Pole Winner records are great. I think Red Garland's trios were a model for that, and then it moved forward from there. So check out Red Garland, and check out Wynton Kelly, and check out Bill Evans, especially the calmer things, right? But then, take a Red Garland record, nothing complicated, and listen to it once, one song, listen to it all the way through, and just how you usually listen to it. See if you can stay with it. See if you can concentrate on it the whole time, rather than getting dreamy or thinking about the past or what you're going to do on your way to the gig, or how cool it would be if you could play that whole arrangement on the guitar. Let those thoughts go and really pay attention to the music and listen to the music. Then, start it over again and just listen to the drums. Right? Or even simpler, just listen to the kick drum and the snare. All the way through. Concentrate on just those few elements. Then go back to the beginning and listen to the bass player. Just the bass player. Try to ignore everything else. Don't let any of the other shiny objects distract you from listening to that bass player. Okay? Listen to it like someone just said, if you can learn this bass line in the next hour, I'll give you $1 million. Listen to it like that. Okay? Good motivator, right? Then, listen to the left hand of the piano. Just the left hand as far as you can perceive it. The lower end of the voicings, right? Repeat, rinse and repeat, listen to the right hand. Just melody. And, is he playing one note at a time, or there's some two notes in there? What's going on? And usually on a piano trio, the left hand is kind of over here and the right hand is kind of over here, in the stereo spectrum. So now you've listened to this thing 5 or 6 times. Then go back and listen to how the bass player and the kick drum react and relate to each other, as you can perceive it, all the way through. And then listen to the ride cymbal. How does the piano player's right hand and the ride cymbal relate to each other, right? So, and you could do this all day long, with one song. Or you could stop there and then just listen to it again like normal and see how you may appreciate it a little differently, right? Because when you're on a gig, you might have to ignore something, and you might have to focus on something else. You might not necessarily be listening to yourself much, because you know what you're doing. You've heard it before, probably, right? So the best musicians are the best listeners, right? If you play with somebody, I played a gig last night down in Portland, and it was a really, really great night. And the drummer confided in me right before the gig. He says, God, I got to tell you, I'm not really feeling myself lately. I feel like I haven't been playing great lately, And I don't know, can we just play something that kind of, just a simple groove to kind of get, things going. He was nervous, about it. We had a captive audience, 50 people sitting in a room staring at us. And he was used to not doing that. He played a little more anonymously, even though he's a really wonderful player. And I just said, look, man, tonight is going to be the best night of your life. You're going to play so fucking good. And you're going to think back on this night 20 years from now and remember how great it was. All right? Don't tell yourself that other nonsense. Don't tell yourself that junk. Right? Listen. Be with us. We're here. We're all going to do it. We all have that attitude, the 3 of us. If you have that attitude, you kill all of us. Right? So get rid of that. Come up with it. Right? And that halfway through the first 2 now look over, he was just digging it, and he played his ass off. He really did. And it's, in some ways, we kind of have to trick ourselves, right? But I was talking about listening. The only way he can get over his own little phobia about not sounding good is by listening to the other guys, right? And then working off of that. being raised up by the other guys. Bill Frisell said something very, very interesting and I think very helpful. He was talking, John Schofield and Bill Frisell were on a stage at some event, and there was a good, insightful interviewer, and they asked him something about playing in a group and what's important about playing in a group. And Bill, in his very inimitable style, kind of plays like he talks like he plays. He says, kind of rocking back and forth, and he says, well, you know, playing music is kind of like you want to save the other people. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want to compete with them. You want to save them. And if somebody goes off and they do something and it's like, oh, well, gosh, we got to go help them. We got to go where they are and bring them up, you know. And I don't remember exactly the word, but it was basically something like, it's not a competition. You want to try and save them, right? And that's true. And if you're playing in a duo or a trio, it's even more true because there's so few people there involved, and anybody's fragility or failure can affect the whole group. And if somebody has a bad moment, rushes a little bit or drops a beat or whatever, and the other participants start scorning, you know, and vibing them and come on, man, or what? No. Oh, we missed something. Okay, now we're together. We'll come, you know, we'll make it all better. We're gonna make it all better, you know. And you know, and when the guys I play with who are like that are the most enjoyable for me to play with. I play frequently with John Stoll, who's a wonderful guitarist, and maybe try and get him to come here sometime and do something like this. He's wonderful. He lives down in Portland, but he's often traveling. We played last weekend at a festival down in California, and it was the best thing that I did, and I think it was the best thing that he did all weekend long, because I was listening. We each played about 10 times, all in different, you know, configurations of it. And the thing I love about John is not only is his music beautiful, I feel safe with him. I feel completely safe with him. Even though he plays things that are a little funny and odd and unique to him, I always know that if I get lost, which I don't usually do, but if I do, or if one of us goes here and one of us goes there, it's not a problem. As soon as we know, we go, okay, come back together, you know? And it's just so refreshing to play at that level with somebody and have them be caring for you. And you can do the same. You can do it for each other, right? So that's about listening and how we use listening in our musical lives. Is it never stops, first of all. Whether you're listening to learn something, that's wonderful. You're listening for enjoyment and enrichment, that's wonderful. Then on the bandstand, you're listening so you can be helpful. And you can contribute something of value, right? Rather than just plowing through and doing your hippest shit, regardless of what anybody else is doing, because that's not very hip. The hippest shit is when everybody's listening to each other. Something beautiful comes out of that empathy. So that's my preach on listening.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think this is, yeah, it's been absolutely phenomenal.
I'm going to do a commercial plug. I have some CDs of Pearl Django and my trio, or a trio, organ trio there. And then I brought two copies of, I bought one copy of my Melodic Blues soloing book, and I bought two copies of Melodic Jazz Guitar Chord Phrases, so a whole book of this. Right? All that kind of stuff. With the book of that. And then there's another book called Melodic Jazz Guitar Chord Dictionary, which I think is a better mousetrap, if I do say so myself. The chord dictionary is a little funny. There's a lot of them out there. When the publisher contacted me and said, "Tim, we'd like you to write a book," and I said, "Oh, what kind of book?" And they said, "A chord dictionary." I said, "No, I'm not going to write a chord dictionary. There's already a million of them out there, and they kind of suck." He says, "Well, if you could write a chord dictionary, how would it be better? If you had to write a chord dictionary and write a better one, how would you do it?" I said, I would organize the material in the book by the melody note of the chord. So that's what we did. So they got 1,000 A chords like you would in any chord dictionary, but they all have a particular note as the top note, and they're organized. So there's 7 chords, 7 A major 9 chords with the 9 in the melody, right? 7 A major 9 chords with the 11 in the melody, or whatever it is. And then it's a way to look them up and find them. So if you're trying to do a chord arrangement, a solo guitar arrangement, and you're looking for a particular kind of chord with a particular melody note in the top voice, there'll be, you know, you can go right to the page, look them up, there'll be 15 of them or 12 of them or whatever, simple ones, and then more complicated ones with more color, but the melody note is going to always be on the top. So anyway, that's that one. I can highly recommend it. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
And you know, if you want to pick up a copy, I can sell them to you, and I can take Venmo or cash.
So how much are they?
$30 each. Not per page. That would be a little ridiculous. Thanks everybody for your kind attention. It's nice to talk to my people. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Oh, and the CDs are $50. Much more reasonable. And,
And
oh, by the way,
those are also purchasable on your website too, right?
yeah, from the website, we'll take you to the website where you can buy more. They are also available on Amazon.com if you want to do that.
Okay.
And CDs are $15. Oh, and all of the books have about 4 hours worth of video behind them. So all of the examples are in this book, and this book are performed.
That's like a trigger field.
And so you can look and listen and do all
I
that.
would've hurt my feelings.
Oh, that's the more the merrier.
And look at, you can look at it if you want, and see what they look like.
Yeah, this would be very good based on our last lesson.
Tim, I have a question.
I just want.
I don't have it.
Yeah.
Very beginning. Yeah. I'd like to grab an organ.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Give me my phone and I'll show you.
Yeah, especially the idea like when you deal with a melody, and you're like, oh, that's a P on G chord, right? The different voices I can use. That's great to just have like a page you can turn to and just, you know, then you're like,
I use all kinds of things and then I just settle with these.
The sticker for the grip.
Just, yeah, so not a grip so much as I just feel it.
Oh, gotcha.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's
I'll do that every feedback.
Man.
Yeah, that's right.
Really
I
big
usually-
solo guitar
What's the
arrangements.
trail at? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Take a second.
I
look at
usually,
it.
I usually
I wanna
use
know
the
what's
now I'm gonna be some
Melody.
wears
off,
the
yeah.
inner voicings of what I'm doing. I'm gonna try just like try
I lose my
something
pick and
to
just get better.
do just like sing in here and actually like hear.
Where did you record this record?
It's funny
It's
'cause
called
I-
the carriage
Yeah,
house.
it's
No,
my
ears,
no,
we just
not
do like
in
a,
that way.
like a
Cool.
2-5,
Yeah,
like
I
like
don't
a
really mind
3-note
how
2-5
it's
yeah.
done.
Last week
Like,
I
what
was
if you
sick.
dropped 3 out?
Right.
It was before that. I had
15,
a
right?
Yep.
big
Right.
deadline.
Here.
Yeah, I don't know, see what happens.
And it's like, where did I hear that? Like, I feel
I
like I
hadn't been
hate school
practicing because I was so
sometimes.
stressed
Yeah.
out my presentation.
But-
so-
Yeah, they asked me for the last 4 of my.
You don't really-
Yeah, I feel like
And I'll
when I'm
do
doing
it.
it, and then I still feel like
It happens.
okay.
Sometimes I ask students to do
Yeah.
things I'm not even sure why I'm asking them. I just ask them to do
just like try and scale it
because
it was like
Okay.
I should do it.
There it
Yeah.
is.
And then something weird happens, they're like, okay, cool, now I get it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
Diatonic
How do
triads.
you want to, how do you want to?
I mean, you know,
you
major.
mentioned Rainbow's
I got
good.
the organ trio album. Because I mean, I've got a couple Plural Django CDs that I bought secondhand for like $3. None with him on it, but
Those we probably got the same things actually.
he does. I think he has for about 10 years, but you know, they've been around since the 90s.
And it's organized like
Yeah,
one,
you could play the jazz.
5, 1,
They're
2,
great.
5, 1,
Yeah.
2, 5, 1.
Yeah.
This is part of the, like, when I have to.
Dude, I want to go see Isaiah
Like,
Short.
trying to, like,
playing on
sit.
Wednesday.
Oh, good.
There's such high
He's the guy who played at D'Angelo. He's like a
Yeah.
gospel or
What-
I know
So
everything's
where
started
it-
in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless it really is the way
Where's
you
he
want,
playing?
but-
Yeah.
His name Jazz Alley.
Oh my God.
Played 2 nights.
D'Angelo is playing jazz?
No. Sorry, Isaiah Sharkey.
Oh,
He's a
okay.
guitarist. No, maybe
I missed the memo on
Yeah,
this.
maybe play like Paradigm.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like.
Climate Coach.
Yeah. If you ever played the show,
I don't have
right?
it.
Right.
He's
If I go out, I forget.
Okay, what do you have?
That was great.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
It got more philosophical than
Zen page and then I'll
You gotta have
just-
that.
Yeah.
You gotta have that. And like people connecting with the musicians you listen
Yeah,
to, I feel like that's sort of like a lost art almost. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
really on this like
Yeah.
militant anti-algorithm, anti-streaming thing right now because
You're welcome.
I find that Spotify is
I
trying to
feel like I
divorce
need
the
to have
listener
more
from the creator to
before I
profit.
try.
This is what
Not to be all paranoid.
this is the
Fucking
fucking
way that finger goes.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. This, yeah,
This,
curation.
This is
Okay.
fucking bullshit.
Yeah, algorithmic
What do
curation.
What do you need? You need to be energized. You need to feel good. You need workout. I mean, it's just. It's like saying like, how can we just give you whatever you want? It's
Yeah.
not about you.
Then I
It's
can
like
like
surrendering to whatever the person has to say.
And if they were curating quality music that might inspire you, then I wouldn't be opposed to it. But usually the curating music made for profits, and that music is made using like AI,
Dude,
ghostwriters,
Looks like
all that shit.
Or just like some Norwegian
Norwegians is the
dude
big winner today.
who plays really bad jazz piano, but
Yeah,
it's like
that's the guy.
100
That's what I'm saying. The guys that like,
Yeah.
or they're really good,
Yeah.
but they're like,
Friends and
all right,
family,
we're gonna
they
license
gives
this,
you the
make it
option.
really bland and
A lot of
vanilla,
phrases
no more than
also
4.5
online,
minutes,
like,
Yeah.
when I
and
get the-
don't make it a hit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
fact,
And then trying to divorce the
you're
listener
too late
from
now,
the.
'cause
Yeah,
I
it is.
brought
That's
the-
why I asked.
I'm
No,
on.
no, it's okay.
I feel like I'm like on like a
You
fucking.
can get the PDF by going
Like,
to
I don't know.
my website.
I'm on a thing about it right now.
timberworks.com,
I actually just got rid of my
and then
Spotify
go
and I'm
pick
like,
the books.
oh, you did? Feeling
And then it'll take you to
liberated.
the
You
My
got
Entire
it.
thing,
Website.
Joe Rogan
The
salary.
PDF
Yeah,
doesn't live
exactly.
on Amazon.
I got
It lives
tired of
on,
paying for
guitardepot.com.
literally the most
So
antagonistic
you
force
can take
against
you there.
the
Amazon only
human
does the
musician.
books.
Oh, okay.
And like what
That
you were
was
saying,
great.
I think
Better,
people
actually.
need to
I like it because you can search through it.
reassess the
Searchable
relationship
and
with people
it's-
who make
you can
music
make
and
it
like
big
dig in and
you
like
can,
listen,
organize
focus.
it anyway, so yeah.
I think it's just so hard with like
I just
how
realized
expensive
I
life
shouldn't
is
get
to
friends
even
and
have the time for it. It's like a luxury to even connect with artists.
I was
Yeah,
really
do friends and family.
It's
you don't
impressed
mind.
with
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
jazz night they did
You
on
don't mind.
a couple weeks ago in Pioneer Square.
Okay.
They-
Right.
Oh, yeah, I remember doing that. I was
We
with someone
just
canceled.
spent
Yeah,
an
right.
hour and a half.
So I could
It was like,
all happened was getting away with the arts again.
Well,
Oh, what were you saying?
it was like 12
minutes.
venues.
And I haven't had any fun every single last week.
That's so sick.
And they were all packed. They all had, there was,
Yeah, I
they couldn't, they didn't have enough space for all the people that wanted to see this.
That's so
Thousands.
cool.
And the fellowship
Yeah,
now, it's like if you don't,
Oh,
yeah, sign up
around
to
with
play.
them for a while.
So you
They're
have
all
to wait.
wait.
Yeah. There was like 20, 30 different ways to play.
That's so
The
cool.
entire room was full.
I guess that gives me hope.
They're young
That gives me
guys.
hope. You teach it?
Yeah,
right?
so
You
it's
teach
starting
it,
to
you
kind
know,
of
like,
like,
I think
All right,
that's
man, what else you gonna do?
But I love it.
I was just curious, like,
And I
if you
want
saw
to
it
see
from
better
your perspective,
than
their
I
department,
like,
regularly in terms of attendance and like people interested in studying.
Were you always writing on
I don't know how many people they can.
It's always been a small group.
I don't know what the capacity of that program is.
Growing. Since I joined, it was pretty small.
Oh, good.
Actually,
It's
it's
really
really
good.
And I'll
a
look
lot
for
more
bass
bass
players
players
and
than
it's
this
hard.
Oh, that's
I
good.
do.
Was it
I
because
had
of
a
fun?
trio that I played.
I don't know.
It's
It's funny.
I played.
Oh yeah, Cone's been there since 2008. But it's funny because there wasn't any
Jazz
trumpet
Fellowship
players
on
there.
May
It was
1st.
just there.
Wow.
This guy's like,
Is that
he's like the best trumpet player.
Yeah,
in
it's
society.
like actually
So,
just like
New joint.
I don't know. Last
So
time
you know,
I had
so like,
idea,
for
and then
example, the reason I asked is because
Yeah, we
I
play-
got
we're
my
playing
Cornish. And I graduated in
August, I
2013.
think.
And from my understanding, from people I've talked to who are in the league there,
All right.
their jazz department is just plummeting. I mean, they don't even have a jazz department anymore.
All right.
It's
Well,
just
they-
general music.
Dude, that's the direction I think
I
that
definitely like
they're
learning
going
the
for.
piano scale.
Okay.
Like I used to.
I
So,
play a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it did because
I
I.
don't know,
I
it's not
think
more like a
that
piano
they're-
player,
yeah,
more
it's
like a
kind of
piano
one of them when I learned.
player.
I mean, I can relate to it.
It's not
because when I try to play something on guitar, I'm
What
like,
have you
I
heard?
can like.
okay, I don't actually know the fretboard that well, but I
They didn't want to have.
I should just try to find
I guess
the
they
seven
like
string
yeah.
on.
Yeah, they're all interesting.
I don't need, and it makes my
And they're
life
getting
harder if I try to play all like eight. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, see, I gotta take